Live, spontaneous live streams, guys. This is what it's all about. Okay, when you get into a conversation with someone and you keep going back and forth and you just say, you know what, I wish we were live streaming this because I know others feel the same way. And so that's essentially how this happened. We've got myself, we've got Brad Hightower, who's also restreaming on his end. We've got the famous Chris Sauber, famous because he has no social media to speak of.
Infamous.
Infamous, all SOS members, and then we have honorary SOS members that they're gonna be there for sure. Robert, at least I know for sure. Justin, we'd love to have you come too. Robert and Justin, they're representing the sponsor side, and small sponsor, but it's a sponsor nonetheless. And they have a long history of working at CRO level, sponsor level. So thank you guys for coming on, everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan, for having me as always.
Yep,
We
thanks. Good to be
we
here.
get Justin. Why don't we start with you because we this is your first time here. You want to give us like a brief background? I think the people know everyone else, but it'd be good to get your background. Then we can get into some of the topics.
Sure. Mostly CRO background. I've been in the industry for over 17 years now. Started in 2005 and started off as a product associate, just doing admin work. And then I worked my way up through CRA, all the way up through CTM. And then I've been managing trials since 2014. And went from the major large CEO or CRO to another large CRO. I was 20,000 when I left the first place globally. Went to a place with 15,000, and it was around 18 or 20,000 when I left that place. Then I went to a small CRO um, with only 700 people globally. It was based out of Poland. Great small company, and I did that before coming over to the sponsor side. I've been on the sponsor side now since 2021.
Very good. So we can get like the benefit of getting sponsor guests on us three on the top worst sites. So we're not often privy to what sponsors are thinking. And I think this is one of the reasons why you, Robert, and soon to be Justin, if you come back on, why you guys are such popular guests. It's almost like we get a chance to get inside the mind of a sponsor, which is very tough to get a glimpse and an accurate portrayal. I guess this is why we even have conferences like SCRS and ACRP and that kind of magi to supposedly try to get inside your guys' head from a site perspective. But it's good to do it live here. So what's been going on your end, Robert and Justin, with the studies you got going on?
Well, Dan, it's always the same thing, right? It's everything we always encounter, working against timelines, deliverables, milestones. I think Dr. Fox is in the comments. He wants to join us.
Oh, fuck! So I'll get you on right now. Let me send you the
Yeah.
link.
But Dan, yeah, just the normal grind, the siloed communications we're dealing with, sites moving, switching addresses. I only find out because I get an IRB notification that they submitted a new redlined ICF. I had no idea. Um,
What do you
you
think
know,
about that? Like sites that want to have a satellite site or
I
maybe
don't
move.
mind. Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, listen, sites are gonna move, but I'm just I bring this up because it's like, hey, let us know, right? I mean, you're supposed to have oversight of your sites. You're managing your sites, and it'd be nice if we were aware prior to me just seeing an IRB notification come through saying, hey, we need sponsor approval for this ICF, and I'm like, wait a minute, this site has no active patients. The enrollment's closed. Why are we doing it? Like, who are they going to consent? A ghost? So that's been going on, Dan. And I'm okay with. Listen, sites move, right? Satellites, I have a whole nother opinion on. In the certain context, I believe it's absolutely needed and phenomenal. but it creates, some more work downstream for, I think, all stakeholders, which is good. Dr. Fox, how are you, sir?
How's it going, Robert? How's it
Great,
going,
man.
team?
Great to see you. Great to see you. I got my buddy Justin here. You haven't met him yet. Sorry for the sidetrack, but he's an associate director here with me, running our phase 2 trial. So just a quick wanted to let you know who is
So
here.
maybe we start with that, Robert. That's a good thing you brought up because I'm thinking about. I was just texting Chris earlier about. I think I need more space. I think I texted you too. I need more space
Yeah.
for two of my PIs, and we're probably going to do satellite sites just to give the monitors more space. What's the proper site etiquette from a sponsor perspective? Should I? Sometimes we feel like we shouldn't bug you guys about everything. Like that's what our CRA is for. Um,
Yeah, Dan, but I mean, you can go to your CRA. Ultimately, it's going to come to us, right? Whether or not we're going to approve a satellite site and kind of the justification, because at the end of the day, it's another place to visit. It's another set of documents. Sometimes you can keep one ISF, maybe another 1572 is going to be needed. Um, but given the right oversight plan from the lead PI, it's, to me, it's not a problem. But it does create some logistical issues, right? The CRA is going to have to visit both facilities. Feasibility has to be done on both facilities. What's going to be done at the satellite site that can't be done at the main site. Brad's, understands everything that I'm saying here. So just kind of I think a good discussion and rationale on why this needs to happen is the right etiquette. And I think, most people are pretty amicable to it. It shouldn't really be that much of a problem, given that it's the right fit, right dynamic.
So
I mean,
I
I
have
had sorry to interrupt. I one last thing before the panel chimes in. I had a site one time come to me like, Robert, we need a satellite site. And this site was like 5 miles away, and he's like, well, my PI only can do physical exams there. He can't do them over there. And I was just like, like the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that one. So it's gotta be a right fit.
So follow-up question to that in terms of not necessarily satellite sites, but just moving in general. So we consult for a number of sites throughout the country, Dan and I. And we're often asked, hey, if I want to move my site to a completely different location, not a satellite site, just site entirely moves, will the sponsor take issue with that? And what we generally advise clients, and you tell me if this is accurate or not, if you've been on the study for a few months and you have no patients enrolled, you might find yourself getting shut down if you request to move, right? In other words, there's no reason for the sponsor to invest the time and resources into moving you when you have been unable to enroll as is. If you have patients enrolled or even one, they want that data, so they'll assuredly be willing to allow you to move.
Yeah, Chris, I don't know if obviously I can't speak for everybody and all the thought light leaders, right? But I mean, if it was me, I guess you bring up a good point in that, okay, so you've been open for 2 months, you haven't screened anybody, you haven't enrolled anybody. Yeah, maybe that might play into the decision, right? But as a general rule of thumb, that's a pretty crummy thing to do. I mean, in my personal opinion, like I would never do that to a site. As you guys know, I'm a huge site advocate, so maybe my maybe my opinion is very different. But there needs to be a little discussion. Hey, before we move forward with this moving plan and get a whole new reg pack submitted, IRB notification, update ICF, updated reg docs, IP transfer policy, like before figuring out all those logistics, what's the plan? Do we need to, do a site recruitment plan update? What's the feasibility look like? We have to obviously tour the facility to make sure that facility is appropriate to conduct the current study. So, before you go down that road, maybe just have those discussions. But I think just the mere fact they haven't enrolled, it would be a very, I mean, again, it really just, as everyone knows, there's always variables, right? The answer in our industry is, well, it depends, right? It's always, it depends, right?
Yep.
So I think it's a very specific scenario that has to be addressed. But from a general high level rule of thumb, I wouldn't necessarily advise people to like be worried about moving their site and losing a study because they haven't been successful. Maybe that's why they're moving, right? And maybe the move is going to
Exactly.
create some more patience for that trial. So I'd keep an open mind personally.
And to add to that too, perhaps it's more of a compliance issue too. They can have more storage because they're taking on more and more studies. They can have more personnel to be,
Certainly.
better run, more efficient. I mean, from my perspective, it's not I would never shut down a site if they're going to be moving. Now, again, it depends. If you're on a 3-month allergic rhinitis study and you're telling me 2 months in that you haven't enrolled anybody, there's a week and a half left of enrollment and you want to
And you're
move.
moving. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a different scenario than like if you're on a long haul enrollment timeline and you're just relocating for whatever
Yeah.
reason. I mean, I've actually, when I was a CRA, I've had to deal with several site moves. And ultimately, it's up to the investigator, the PI on the 1572, to maintain the adequacy of the site. So
Yep.
I've even seen it to where a site was relocated and we didn't do an assessment visit until after they were relocated, because you can't really assess the sites for the validity of a study when their equipment isn't in place yet, because it's still at the old facility. And they had a plan in place to move all the equipment over the course of a weekend to relocate the IP in a controlled manner. And that's going to get even trickier if you have IP that requires refrigeration. What's your plan? Having a well thought out plan in order to make that move from one site to the next, and have a clear cutoff date when this site is no longer in operation and this site is going in. I think it's definitely, it all comes down to planning and just communicating effectively with your CRO and your sponsors, letting them know what's going on, right? Let them know during feasibility. Like, don't surprise them after, like, you do an SIV and then at the SIV they're like, oh, by the way, we're moving next week. Well, we would have waited for the SIV if you would have told us, So it just be clear in what your plans are.
Well, and keep in mind that every single CTA has a business address on it of the site. So if you are moving, there's many, many more pieces that need to be changed other than that. And let's face it, moving is expensive. So if sites are doing it, there's probably a really good reason. And if you see a site investing in a move, it's likely an investment to improve a sponsor study, just like what Justin was saying.
So as a follow-up to you, Robert, do you ever shut down a site for lack of enrollment? They're not moving, just they're not enrolling. So do you shut them down? And if so, why?
Yeah. So Chris, I mean, I've had to make tough decisions, and they're just strictly business decisions at this point. Where we give them adequate notice. We have roundtables, we have one-on-ones, we have the medical director meet with the PI one-on-one. We bring the CRCs on. We update the site recruitment plan. We do a motivational visit. It's really a last resort when we have to actually move to that way, and bring on sites like rescue sites who are actually willing and able to add value to the study. I've actually had a PI literally tell me, he's like, Robert, during one of these meetings where a site I had to close down, it was kind of funny because I was reading the trip report. This happened probably, I would say 12, 13 months ago, but I just happened to be reading the trip report, and the CRA indicated how upset the PI was that this was the decision that was made. But the PI literally told me, he's like, I don't have time for your study. I don't have time to sell your study. I need a trifold brochure. I'm like, you have one. You have two, as a matter of fact. It's, like, I'm happy to send them to you, and I'll even print them in color for you. And if that's what it takes. He's like, well, I have nothing to send, nothing to hand the patient. And when the patient's at my clinic, they're here for treatment. They're not interested in this study. They want relief right now. They don't want to be sold a study. So I'm like, okay, well, is there anything we can do to support your efforts in selling the study? Right? How, whatever. And Chris, like, when he had that type of position,
certainly.
Yeah, he was already on his way out.
You got it. His one
Yep.
foot was out the door already.
Yep.
So, but it was weird because his dismay in the report, as conveyed by the CRA, was pretty opposite from the outreach we have done. And keep in mind, this is like probably the 6th encounter. Again, you guys, me. I don't want to shut down a site. That's the last thing I want to do. But at a point, it's a business decision, right? We're paying the CRO to oversee the site management, IRB review fees. There's a whole host of other things downstream that you have to make a decision at some point in time where it's no longer of value, and you got to bring in a site like Dan or Brad or Chris that can actually or you, Dr. Fox, that can provide value to the trial. And that's why I have these conversations. I call up people like Dan, call up people like Brad, you, Dr. Fox, Chris, and I say, hey guys, here's what I got. I'm in a pickle. I'm 3 months behind enrollment. My screen failure rate's higher than anticipated, being super transparent, by the way, because now we have the metrics to share. And, is this a good fit for you? Yes, no, maybe so. If it is, great, we move forward. But there's too many other people out there that deserve an opportunity to add value so that we can get these therapies to market. Having a site that's just sitting there doing nothing, for 4, 5, 6 months, it's actually detrimental to our mission, right?
Well, not only that, just it could be counter active to everything. So one of the worst things that you can have is have a site sit there for a year, no enrollment, and then a month before you meet your enrollment target, they enroll 1 patient.
Oh, then you just, oh my gosh, that's terrible.
And they ruin everything, by the way.
Because now you have
all new retraining, so many deviations, all these issues that you have that you addressed a year ago with all the other sites, you have to address with this site now.
Yep, and then you have to extend enrollment and extend data collection and hold data locks for a whole other year because someone added 1 patient onto a trial. Now, and on to what Robert was saying, I've had many a conversation with a sponsor as a site saying, hey, you know what? Continuing review is coming. This just isn't working at our site. Can you close this down so we can save you money? You don't have to be paying for another continuing review. And you should see their faces when they're like, holy crap, you mean you actually have our finances in your best interest? I was like, well, yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Fox, you're the unicorn, man. The people on this panel are the unicorns of the industry. That's what more people need to do. Like, I would have been grateful for a site to say, Robert, look, this isn't a good fit for us. We've tried. We gave it the good old college try.
Let's save your money. Why don't you focus your money on getting it done somewhere else successfully?
Maybe in the
not
future.
Working out. Just
maybe
close
in
us
the
out.
future, right?
Yeah.
We can recollaborate. No,
yeah.
See, that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah.
But instead, Dr. Fox, what's happening is people are, I'm going to get my, my pharmacy fee. I'm going to get my monthly this fee.
Startup
I'm going to get my record retention fee. I'm going to get my closeout fee. Like it's kind of like, it's again, it moves back to the notion of the limited risk from the site's perspective. What there's no skin in it. I mean, there is skin in the game, but there isn't, right? So they may have, again, depending on how the budget and the contract is set up, they may have a whole bunch of invoiceables that they can do on a month-over-month basis. And it's it's unfortunate that we do see that. But to Chris's, question, sometimes we just have no other choice. But it would be super ideal for a site to come to us and say, hey, you know what? Continuing reviews on the way, or it's not on the way. And even beforehand, we've tried, we've combed our EMR. We're using recruitment services out of our advertising stipend that is built in the budget. Typically $5,000 is given, pretty standard in the industry, right, guys? And they've done everything that they can do. I know that's kind of a laughable thing, the $5,000. I'm with you, but either way, at least they're trying, and they've exhausted all their all their pathways. Yeah, you got to close up shop. You got to kind of know when to fold them.
Those are the sponsors that come back to you. So to any of the sites who want to milk all what they call the gravy train, that's the end of the gravy train. That's short sight. Yeah. Look at the long term. If you build a relationship with a sponsor and show that they can trust you, that they can trust the budget with you, that you use efficiently, and you have their best interest, they're going to come back with 10 times the amount of value and revenue with productivity.
I feel like, I'm with everything you guys are saying, but most of this relies on a level of communication you don't get with like 80% of the trials we do.
Yes.
I mean, these things happen with smaller companies that you have a direct sponsor interaction on a regular basis. But for the most part, we're running a lot of trials with a CRO where I've got a new CRA every 3 months and then a new CTM somewhere randomly reaching out to me every so often. And we don't have this level of like candor, I guess. You know what I mean? So I think that's like, again, I'm with you on all these things, but I feel like that stuff gets overlooked way more often than it doesn't.
Brad, why do you think that is? Like, why do you guys think that is? Is it like here's my take, and I think that's a really interesting comment, Brad, because I got to be honest here. Let's this doesn't help me not being honest here, right? I feel like when I reach out to a site to have any type of dialogue, or when the CRO copies, includes me on an email, it's always perceived negatively by the site. Why are you copying the sponsor? Why is the sponsor calling me? Like, why isn't the CRO, like, because the typical pathway of communication is, I run things through the CRO and the CRO reaches out to the site. But if I sidestep the CRO, sometimes, Brad, your CRC answers the phone and she comes to you. It's like, Brad, so-and-so just called me from so-and-so. And like, it's just, the perception is negative. Why? Like, we need to stop that.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, there's definitely, it's complicated, right? Because at the site, like we're getting our, like, it feels like you're getting your ass chewed all the time. Like that's what the job of the CRO is, to constantly be like, no, you did this wrong. You did this wrong. You did this wrong. And there's not a lot of, more open constructive. So I think CRCs are oftentimes on the defense sort of, by default, because to your point, I mean, it's sort of how it's pitched to you. Like, hey, let's just talk. I'm not not coming after you, but I can understand why a CRC would be like, oh God, why is the sponsor going to talk to me? I don't want to talk to this guy. I'm going to get in more trouble. But
Right.
also, let's be really honest too. And I hate to say this, but a lot of sites just aren't very good. Their coordinators don't care. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I was having a conversation with someone and they're like, man, these sites won't answer the phone for leads. And I'm like, hey, I'm really sorry. Maybe you should just focus on the sites that are doing a good job.
Get the good sites.
A lot of sites aren't that good at what they do, and it may not be their fault entirely. I think that's why we're all here. We want to make the site ecosystem better. I don't think anyone sets up shop to fail. They don't want that to happen. It happens for a number of reasons, but unfortunately, that's still the case. I think there's a lot of just not great sites out there.
What's funny, Robert, is that's exactly what I get from the CROs. If they look at me and say, why are you copying the sponsor? And it's the same exact thing. I'm copying the sponsor because you're not doing your damn job.
Right.
I'd be curious to know. I spoke at Magi last year, and it was with a CRO. We did like a panel about budgets, and there were some sponsors in the crowd and some CRO folks in the crowd. And I was actually really shocked by the sort of disconnect between sponsor and CRO. I guess I shouldn't be, knowing what I know, but the CRO guy would say one thing and someone would come up to me later as a sponsor and be like, hey, actually, like, we want to know that stuff. Like, he was wrong. Like, and we didn't know that sites had some of these concerns. So, I mean, I would even ask, Robert, you're probably unique in a lot of ways, and maybe your experience is a little different than the norm, but is that, how big of a problem is that? Like, how much do you not know because of the gap between sponsor and site?
A lot. I don't know unless I'm not copied on an email or if I don't ask. So it's a huge challenge, Brad. I mean, I always want to tell, my CRO partners, I'm like, hey, let's let's over communicate, err on the side of caution. Oh, I'm trying to spare your inbox. No. Blow my inbox up. I'll triage the emails I want to triage. And that's why subject line is important. But, that's the whole problem. I don't know if I don't ask, and I don't know if I'm not copied. So they, I think this is, it's not unique just to my situation. I think all CRO sponsor relationships, it's the same dynamic. So unless you have a communication platform that all emails, and guys, we've all copied like this study archive email box, right? Good luck going to find an email in that thing. Okay. Literally, pick your 3-letter CRO favorite one. Okay. I go into the study archive and I'm like looking at, 500,000 emails.
Wow.
And it literally takes, 38 minutes just to do a keyword search. They're useless. So again, it's like even if you copy this study archive email box over the duration of the life cycle of a study, the chances of finding it useful is slim to none. So we've got to figure out a communication pathway where people just stop this. Like sponsors aren't just being copied because something's going wrong, or sites, or if you're a site and you're copying the sponsor in an email to the CRO, that should also not be looked at negatively. It's all of us working towards a common goal. We're all on the same side of the team here, like, guys, right? I mean, we're not, it's not CRO versus site. It's not site versus sponsor. It's not, it's everybody together working to get therapies to these patients who are in our trials. I mean, that's why we're doing this. So we've got to figure out why there's this. How did we get here?
There's
How
very
did we get here?
little. There's very little autonomy between like the people that actually work at the sites. I mean, yeah, you have myself, Dr. Fox, Brad, Chris. We're the owners. I'm not going to lose my job calling the sponsor and asking a question and probably getting authentic feedback, way more transparent than I would get calling the CRO. But my coordinators, when I do this stuff, they're like, "Oh, good thing you're doing it," because I mean, I'm not going to do it. And even when I tell them it's okay if you run into issues, you can call the sponsor, they're afraid. And that's at a
Yep.
small site. I can't imagine at a bigger site. I mean, you're gonna, if you're the CRC doing 90% of the work, last thing you're gonna do is risk your job just so you can get an authentic answer. So I think a lot of this at the site level is empowering your staff to understand what's appropriate and what's not when it comes to communication. And then from the CRO side, don't get me started. Chris and I did an RFP for our CRO. We saw the budgets that these CROs have. There's a line item for everything written out in four different triplicate. Same thing. They have a communication plan. They have an internal communication plan, an external communication plan, a vendor communication plan. God knows what else, hybrid of those.
An escalation communication plan. Don't forget that one.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're not prepared to get paid for this stuff. They could over communicate. It's literally in the budget, but they don't.
And each one of those communication plans is a line item on the budget, meaning they want to get paid for each one that they generate, and they just generate it from a template.
Yep.
It's just a template that they go in and they put in study specific stuff, and they want $3,000 for it.
Wow.
So yeah,
Chris and I were doing one yesterday. Chris and I were doing one yesterday. After 18 years in this industry, I've never actually gone through like line by line what's in a typical CRO proposal. And my God, I was telling Chris, this is why we're paying so much for our medications. Like I see it now.
Partially.
It's in here. Partially, yeah. It's not that simple, but we got some questions. You guys want to? And by the Chris, are you and Brad in the same location? I noticed by your background. It's very similar.
Chris is on the outside. Brad's on the inside.
Chris can't get in. Brad's not letting him in.
Gotta be the wolf. He's the pig.
So before we move on, there's a couple of points that people made. So Brad, you mentioned something about like turnover with CRAs. So you're always getting a new CRA every 6 weeks or whatever. Like there's a flip side to that too, where we work with a lot of sites where there's a new study coordinator every couple of months, right? And I've actually seen sites that try to combat this CRA turnover with, putting something in their budget, asking for a fee every time that there's a new CRA. Well, I always kind of balk at that, and I'm like, okay, go back to the site and ask them if we can put one in that every time we get a new study coordinator, they pay us back money. And then again, then it gets removed from the budget, right? Because it's like turnover on one side, but not the other is acceptable, right?
Sure.
And the challenge too is that as the sponsor, we have very little control over the CRA turnover because we're not employing the CRAs, it's the CRO. So we're the ones having to foot the bill for the CRAs turning over at the CRO side. And Justin, that's a problem too.
But
that's
Justin,
a whole other that's a whole other conversation,
podcast.
Justin.
Yeah,
and I could go on both sides of that. I understand everything completely. Then you look at the contract and you understand why and what's going on, the logistics behind it, and the fact that at least sponsors aren't limited to their data when a CRC is changed out, but sites are limited to their payments when CRAs don't make monitoring visits, and we have to retrain them. So that's a whole other. Let's make that another podcast. But I got some questions. Let's talk about the questions.
Yeah.
We got plenty of podcast. Yeah, we got so many questions too. There's one that's interesting here. Vans RV. Not sure if they're trolling or it's legit. You can't tell anymore. But are mobile sites vans allowed?
Oh no, too soon. Too soon.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. Let's say someone has a number of practices spread across a state, and they want to do a different day in a different city. Robert and Joseph, what do you guys think about this?
I mean, I've seen mobile imaging units. I think we've all seen these where they do stress testing, like in a an RV or half of a semi truck. I mean, I think this is a little bit far fetched in terms of a van or an RV. But if you're asking about like a mobile aspect to implement a study, I think from a DCT perspective, yeah, sure. But if you mean like the PI is just gonna roll around in a in an RV and to a parking lot and patients are just gonna meet him in a random place, I mean,
And what would that look like on a 1572?
right, exactly. Well, you'd have to have those places predefined. I
The
mean,
Flying J loves.
yeah.
Now, I imagine if they went to the patient's house, that would probably be more acceptable. Like, where's the van and RV like parked every night, right? Does it come back to the clinic? I mean, because we have in decentralized trials, we have nurses that go to patients' house and do lab processing and all that stuff. So I don't know that it's all that far fetched, but I think this is like, where would you put it? Next to the pop-up, restaurants that show up? I mean, like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't look. I'll go on record. I don't think anything is in and of itself a terrible idea. It's about the execution, and I think how it's done, and not that you can't do all of every visit in a mobile situation. You might have problems, managing samples or giving people carbon monoxide poisoning or whatever the case is that we've all heard the stories about. But again, I think if you don't know what you're doing in the first place, then you're going to have problems.
Yeah. I agree. It has to be holistic. You can't just have some people say, I want to solve this problem by making it very efficient and then not knowing anything about regulation or never reading a CTA or ever doing anything like that and being so laser focused on fixing something that they screw everything else up around it. I think that's where you're going to run into the problem.
Next question. Gurpreet says, how do you support sites? This is a good one for you, Justin. You brought this up. How do you support sites that may be dealing with unanticipated turnover? You really can't, can you?
Actually, I have seen sponsors can sometimes, given enough motivation, reimburse for additional hours. So sometimes there's a concern with not enough hours, not enough staffing to do the study. So hiring of temporary staff or more hours for the time or more money to go into fewer hours, depending on how they're allocated, as long as we get dedicated personnel. I've also seen there's some, I don't know if they're CROs or some organizations within the industry that basically provide sites, CRCs. So those are alternatives.
Yeah, as well. I would recommend, because we were actually doing very well in a study. We didn't have turnover, but the sponsor wanted to help us by helping provide someone to help do data entry. If you're a site, be very careful. I'm not going to tell the story on air because it's inappropriate. But if you want to know,
man, those are the best.
If you want to come, if you really want to know, you can message me about it. But we did it twice with two different people, and we had to let them both go very, very quickly. And they were provided through the sponsor, through a staffing agency. And, to me, sites are oftentimes a delicate balance of culture. And so I think you guys have to be really, really careful about that as a site. I mean, obviously they want to help you. The sponsor wants to help you, but again, I think one bad apple can ruin the bunch, as they say, and that can cause a big problem at a site, especially a small site.
So if you were to walk into a restaurant right now, a burger joint, and you walked in and you went up to the counter and you said, "Hey, I want to help you make your hamburgers," they would look at you and say, "I'm sorry, you're not an employee of this burger joint." And I know it sounds really strange, but if you look at it on a legal level, sponsors don't necessarily have that capacity to support these sites. This is something that a site has to develop. Dan talked about it with a farm system. We have to talk about good succession for our professionals, and we have to understand that sponsors can't solve all of our site's problems. That's why they're hiring us as independent contractors anyway. So my one recommendation is that the best way that a sponsor could possibly support a site for unanticipated turnover is just to pay them fairly so that sites can afford to do the work. I don't think that there's much more of a solution beyond that. It's like, I'm not saying sponsors don't have the right to do this. I'm just saying it's not the sponsor's responsibility.
I'm with you, Dr. Fox. I completely agree with you. I mean, look, if a site comes to us and says, "Hey, we need help. We don't have the resources," that's a completely different conversation than us just offering things that may not even be applicable to that particular site, right? So I think to answer Gurpreet's question, which is great, is that it's we will support you as a site however we can, but to Dr. Fox's point, these are the contingency plans that each site should have in place, and transition plans and backup support staff, because if you lose 2-3 coordinators, sometimes they go in groups. Business has to continue. So it's really up to the sites, and that's why we choose great sites to work with, trusted sites that have been through these types of problems, that have the contingency plans to support the study, because there's still patients here, guys, right? They have to be taken care of. They have to be seen. So I think just to wrap it up here, what's that?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, I think from our perspective, we're willing to do whatever we can do to help you. If that means a temporary support staff, I'm personally not a fan of that, for the reason you mentioned, Dr. Fox. But on the other hand, how do I ensure as a sponsor that this person that we are paying for is truly being allocated 8 hours a day?
Mm-hmm.
The likelihood of that
toward you
happening,
study, and
or
not
even
to another sponsor, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's another concern, right? I mean, it's pretty challenging. You guys have multiple trials going on. Could be dozens, it could be 20, 30. I've seen sites 40, 50 studies going on simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So if I bring
yeah, a lot of that speaks to the point you kind of made, though. Like, I think this provides an opportunity for great sites to differentiate themselves, right? Like, this is how you can be a kick-ass site: is don't, manage your business so that you're not overloading your CRCs. And look, I understand better than anyone that's easier said than done, because yes, do we get paid fairly? Do we get paid on time? Yeah, probably not. But either way, I think that's a big opportunity for sites to be that kick-ass site, right? You're not overburdening your CRCs, and you're not under delivering because you can't keep up with things. So it's an unfortunate thing. Not everybody can be helped. Sometimes it's just up to us. That's why you partner with those sites.
And please submit packed surveys. That's the whole point, is you want to pull out the good sponsors and the good sites. We have a risk assessment score for this, so that the sponsors can go in there knowing that the sites they work with are super. And then the sites who work with the sponsors know that they're not going to get screwed over.
And then the other human aspect of this, right? Unanticipated turnover is unanticipated, right? There's always going to be that element to this. And whether it happens at the sponsor level, the site level, the CRO level, the vendor level, it's inevitably going to happen. It's imminent, right? So we just have to kind of roll with it and, work as a team to overcome any challenges. That's just really how I think it works.
So I have a question for the sites then. So I see a lot of turnover with CRAs, but for CRC turnover, what's the leading reason for the turnover? I've always assumed
they get
that
poached by CRAs.
Yeah, that's what I've always assumed. That they talk to the CRAs say, "Oh, you could get to travel, keep your points," and we're always looking for good CRCs to be a CRA. Is that really what's happening?
It's
I'll get a
succession.
$10,000 referral bonus. Come on over. Of course, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
It's absolute succession. And so you have to just bank on succession. Employee retention is an oxymoron because odds are you really don't want a CRC to be a CRC for 30 years because they're not going to be that driven employee. You're going to have to embrace a farm system and succession because CRCs are where it all starts.
Talk about this all the time. I mean, we're overstaffed on purpose for this reason, and we're all cross-trained on purpose because it's inevitable. It's not, oh, I got unlucky and my CRC left. No, that's an inevitable part of this game.
You should wish that. You should wish that for some of your CRCs, right?
Yeah.
Like if you can go make more money, and because you've done a good job here, and you've been taught and trained well. That's great. Good for you. You should be supporting that.
Or treat them better and keep them longer. Like, that's the other alternative. A lot of the sites are not free of blame. Like, all this stuff, oh, help us enter data, help us recruit, help us retain our staff. Like, what are you doing at the end of the day? Why are you in business as a site? Like, if you need help with all this stuff, like, what is your core competency? Ultimately, it's keeping your CRCs happy and empowered so that they can do their job. If they're not doing their job, someone's got to manage them. That's the way I see it.
Well, and it costs sponsors money too, because we have to go in and retrain everybody. And, and when, especially if you're using some kind of training platform, when you pay per username. So, I mean, it can get pretty expensive for us as well.
Oh, but Justin, don't worry. The CROs have the retraining staff fee. We saw it. Me and Chris saw it. Actually, 3 times in the same budget. So don't worry. It's in there in triplicate.
Now, I don't want to get Dan banned or anything, but do you ever wonder what would happen if we funneled all that money going to CROs to our sites? How successful we might be? Like,
should have like a CRC retention fund. Hey, if you've worked here 12 months and your performance reviews have been good, here's a bonus. I mean, sites should be doing something similar to this anyways. We got a question here. Is it better to tell the sponsor you won't be enrolling more subjects?
Yep. 100% honesty. 100% honesty.
That's always future work.
Future work. You want transparency because and you're going to save yourself some phone calls. How many of those booster phone calls are going to be a waste of time if sites have already made up their mind? So 100%, the more money you save the sponsor, the better.
When do sites need to get realistic? Because there's always hope. Like, oh, well, we haven't tried this. This might work. And then when that doesn't work, oh, well, we're still going to try this. Like, you don't want to give up either as a site.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. I was like, do you really want to know my answer? Mine's called the startup payment test.
What's that test?
The startup payment test. If you've enrolled 3 patients, it's been 6 months and you haven't received a dime. It's like, I think we're done here. Let's just finish our obligations and be done because you're not a reliable sponsor. I gauge it off of the responsiveness of the sponsor to keep their promises, not necessarily financial, but everything. And so if a sponsor comes to me and says, hey, we want more patients on your study. And I said, well, for one thing, you did a complete bait and switch and completely doubled the cost of this and never renegotiated the rates. It's a point where the sites have to take a financial assessment of how much it costs to enroll a patient and to take that patient through versus the budget versus whether or not the sponsor is willing to actually fund the trial. That's when I have that conversation with them.
So from the sponsor side, I would say if with the whole bait and switch, if something is more complicated than originally thought and it takes you longer, I think it's perfectly reasonable to go back to the sponsor and ask for more money for those procedures. I would rather have that conversation than, well, it's just not affordable for us to run this trial anymore. Because if it's not just you at that point either. It's other sites, and that's going to hurt us overall in the long run.
So, real story, actual story. I'll hide the names because I don't want to get sued. A predatory pharmaceutical development CRO was working with us on a sponsor. They activated our site. Predatory pharmaceutical development. I'll just let you utilize that as an acronym.
We get it.
So they They started us up. We were the top enroller in the world on their study, in the world. Then they submitted a protocol amendment and required like handfuls of local labs that were not in the budget. And then we came back and they said, okay, there's all these things. It's costing us thousands of dollars to run your trial. We're not making any money. We're losing it. So we're not enrolling anymore. We can't. It's not cost effective. It doesn't meet our quality standards to have an underfunded trial. Predatory pharmaceutical development itself said, sorry, there's no budget negotiations allowed. Okay.
I think I get it.
So now
Escalate that to the sponsor. The sponsor has this final say
went to
on
the
that.
sponsor. It did all of that, but it took 6 months for it to go to the sponsor. And I'm sure that sponsor was getting all kinds of communication fees as a result. So what ended up happening is we kept getting those newsletters. Oh, here we are on the top of the enrollment charts. And we slowly dwindled down to the bottom because we weren't fully funded. So, and because our CRO friend did not take the initiative in a timely manner. So we had to be very honest with the sponsor. We said, I'm sorry, but this is underfunded. We'll fill all of our obligations. Patients on the trial, they'll be through, but we're not rolling it. We're not enrolling anyone else. This is just not working out. It's not working out on a financial level. It took you 18 months to pay us a dime, and you're fully underfunding us. So we're just going to cut our losses, finish our obligations, and be done. So to answer Clara's answer to her question, absolutely, 100%, as much transparency as possible to the sponsor, as long as you can get through your CRO friends.
Yeah, or not. I mean, you can just find who they are. I've gotten very good results just using LinkedIn and entering the biotech name and getting like a handful of people that I think are involved in my study. It's not that hard for the smaller sponsors. Why is it challenging for a sponsor to have a sincere discussion with CROs and sites selected for studies to remove the roadblocks to smooth and successful study delivery? It's a loaded question. This is the whole premise for SOS.
I was going to ask a question about that, Robert. Just popped in my mind. But when you sign a contract with the CROs, do you have to have any language in there that talks about your communication pathway and how you're not allowed to talk to the sites? Is it ever in there? So
not that I've seen. I just, you know what, I think I know where you're going. Like, why is it that way, right? Like, if it's not there, again, it's that perception. It's me not wanting to ruffle feathers when I don't need to. I mean, I could reach out with great intentions to the site, and just by virtue of, oh, it's Robert from the sponsor on the phone, like there's just like this tension, like if they even come to the phone, right? And we got to work on that as a community to stop that from that feeling. Like, CRC should not feel intimidated, sites should not feel intimidated, and as the sponsor, quite frankly, I can reach out to whoever I want to reach out. I don't need to ask for permission to anybody. If I want to call your site, or I want to call Dan's site, or I want to call Brad's site and talk to you, I don't need anyone's permission to do that. But what concerns me, I won't be calling
Chris.
But it's my concern is that if I do that, am I going to annoy you? Right? Because not all sites are appreciative of those types of phone calls. And some sites, I think, just creature of old habits, prefer going through their CRA. They don't enjoy talking to the sponsors. Again, you guys might be the unicorns on the panel who probably prefer talking to your sponsor friends, because you get things much quicker and you get better information. But
they just don't want us to complain about them publicly. I think that's we're getting some of that at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right, guys. Every single time I have a conversation with a site, it's unavoidable. I mean, it's I can call about, hey, you guys are just one. I've literally called sites to thank them. Hey, you guys are doing so great. Thank you. You've single-handedly contributed to the success. Like, you're just doing great work. Just wanted to call them thank you. And that turns into, well, since I have you, I just want to let you know that the CRA came here at 10 o'clock and left at 2 p.m. and took a 1 hour lunch. I'm like, oh, wow. Well, I'm sorry that happened. Thanks for letting me know. And then I'm on the horn with the CRO, like, hey, did you know this feedback I just got? And then the CRO is mad at me because they think that I went out and sought this
Undermined
feedback.
them.
They
Yeah,
think
it's like
you're auditing. They think
it's
you're
like
auditing them.
see, so like this whole cycle is just it's so broken and bad. It's like I feel like so I tell the CRO, I'm like, well, maybe you should think about sending a survey. But then again, you guys don't feel like filling out this survey. Do you guys really want to throw or toss your CRA under the bus and say, yeah, Robert showed up at 10 o'clock, took an hour lunch, and he left for the airport at 2. I got 4 pages of open action items. I still got a backlog. I've got 100 post-it notes in my site file. But he left at 2. He was on site for maybe 3.5 hours.
Yep. I have coordinators who will not fill out those surveys because they're afraid of CRA retaliation. It is a real
know this
thing.
though. Know this. So the CRA, it's impossible for the CRA to know where the feedback's coming from, or at least they should not know. So I can tell you again, pick your favorite 3-letter CRO that they do typically send out surveys. The line managers of the CRAs will send out a survey, not always, but maybe once a quarter, and you'll come to your manager, your line manager meeting, whether you meet with them biweekly or monthly, and they just give you random feedback. Now, to your point, Dr. Fox, I could probably, if I have 8 to 10 sites or 10 to 12 sites assigned, and one of my, my line, you got to be tactful with this. And you have to be strategic as a line manager. You have to know what information to divulge because you don't want your CRA identifying what site gave that feedback. So simply as a line manager, I would say, listen, I've received feedback from several of your sites that you're not on site for 8 hours. That CRA knows they're not on site for 8 hours. And it's not just at one site, they're doing it at multiple sites.
Yep.
So now, so it's kind of like in the way that you deliver the message, but I agree. I mean, I can understand where your CRCs are coming from, that they are in fear of retaliation. That but really, at the end of the day, you as a site can call up the sponsor of the CRO and say, hey, listen, this CRA is detrimental. It's toxic. They're not working well with my staff. They're being overbearing. They're asking for unrealistic requests. Expectations are not being managed. We need a new CRA. You guys have that right to do. You guys shouldn't be requiring your staff to work in this toxic environment where everybody's on pins and needles. That's not something that I would want any of my team members involved in either. So
Chris,
I think
remember
it's
when you
I was just
requested a
about to give a
new?
warning on that.
Be careful
Be
about that.
forewarned on requesting new CRAs. Just be forewarned. You may not like what you get.
You're absolutely right, Chris. Right? I mean, that's the gamble you're taking, right? You might have wished, shoot, I should have.
I will say this. We have had a situation where we had a disgruntled CRA who pinpointed who put out these surveys, who invented queries that were not true, that we caught them in the act. But I will say you have to be very, very careful. Be very careful when you fill out those surveys. It's good to be honest. They try for being anonymous, but sorry, I just broke up there. My point is,
queries.
there's a reason.
That's a new one, friend. We've had some pretty bad CRAs back in my day. Me and Chris shared one. Luckily, they've been a lot better lately. But man, yeah, be careful about requesting a change to your CRA.
Speaking of that CRA, so we had a CRA that was difficult to work with. So something probably similar to what Dr. Fox is describing. They didn't create queries, but they were difficult to work with. So we thought, we'd be better off with a new CRA. They literally gave us a crazy CRA. I mean, it's not an exaggeration. The person got fired, and the replacement said that she had a mental illness.
She was like probably borderline personality.
Yeah,
it was a bad situation.
Yeah.
Our CRC was crying. We had all kinds of stuff to deal with. SOS conference should be quite an event. Thank you, LinkedIn user. I couldn't agree more. 2224. look forward to finding out more on how this dialogue can make a positive impact. We hope
Mhm.
so. Somebody's mentioning LMS with repository of key trainings creates an evergreen resource to support training new staff on study-specific training.
Versatrial. Shout out to
Oh, yeah.
Versatrial.
Wow,
mean,
you're making my job easy for me, man. Yeah, thank
Right.
you. First
Yeah.
trial.
Yeah, I mean, Justin and I are meeting with those guys tomorrow again for a follow up. We had a meeting with them first, and I'm a fan of what they're doing,
I'm a
But
huge fan.
yeah, huge, and obviously, and here's a great opportunity to link all your trainings, and that way when you have attrition or turnover, everything's in a central place. That person
It's
can pick it
easy.
up. It's right there. It's right there.
It's what we should have had. It's such a simple solution, yet it's like so valuable. Do you guys think we're paying enough for the professional development of CRC because they're the building block of this whole ecosystem? Short answer, no.
Absolutely not. They're the most underpaid, undercompensated, most crucial aspect of the whole puzzle of this clinical trial ecosystem that we live in. But hey, it's the way that it is right now. I mean, I think it'd be great to have a CRA salary get funneled to a CRC.
Mhm.
But the site budgets don't afford that, unfortunately. And just to answer the
So
question,
so knowing what we know about site budgets, like we said that the CRO budgets are very line item, but so are site budgets in a lot of regards. A question I would be curious to know: how much of the CRC fee per visit gets funneled back to the CRCs?
100 or 300% of it.
300%?
No, I mean seriously, like the
No,
fees.
I don't doubt you.
Yeah, CRC fees are fully underfunded because of so many different reasons. That again, that's a whole other podcast. But it kind of goes back to the whole, we're not the industry's babysitters. We're not the business's babysitters. If we talk about trying to make these holistic ecosystems of professional development, and that's good on a global standard, but we as businesses need to be the ones to make those decisions for reinvestments. It's not the sponsor's responsibility or right to tell sites what to do with their employees. And I just saying, and I saw a comment somewhere about just giving sites more money isn't the solution. I agree. Let the greedy sites go extinct, reinvest in the sites with a proper margin who know what to do with it. They will float to the top, I promise. And you're going to have that encouragement of a professional development.
yeah,
So
I agree
Fair
completely.
enough. Chris, what do you
Agreed.
think? CRC budget goes back to the CRCs? Sites have to like fund a lot of this stuff.
Depends on the budget.
I mean,
Sometimes
we're
yes, sometimes
subsidizing.
no.
We're also subsidizing CRC salary when there's no activity,
yeah.
and when we're way past screen fail cap, and so
Sure.
there are situations where we're losing money off of a CRC if we don't have other studies for them from which to generate revenue.
Or when you pay a CRC for 15 minutes of work and it takes them 90 minutes, which that's pretty much a guarantee.
That's where it goes back to the conversation earlier, though. I think sites need to be more willing to pull the plug and walk away once it's not, worth the damn anymore. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a business, right? So to be able to say, hey, sorry, this isn't working for us. Here are our problems. If they can't be addressed or solved, then I don't know that we have any other, choice for both of us than to just walk away, and we'll put our, interests and time and effort into the study that's working.
Right. I mean, no business, if they're even selling tangible goods, is going to continue to reorder a product that they can't get off their shelves. Oh, we're just going to let it expire and we'll keep reordering the same thing even though it's not being sold. I mean, you're absolutely right, Brad. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's why transparency in knowing when to walk away amicably and appreciatively, and we look to collaborate down the road. Look, it's a small industry, right? We all cross paths once again, and maybe in the future there's another opportunity. I mean, I've had, during a probably last year at this time when I was, frantically searching for rescue sites, I can't tell you, I was so impressed with so many sites. They were like, Robert, look, I just can't do this. Like the timelines aren't for me. I want to maintain my reputation. The sites were referred to me like, hey, these are really reputable stand-up sites, super high quality. And I can't tell you guys how much I appreciated that candor. Like, she was completely honest with me. It was a site in Denver. And she's like, listen, any other future studies that you have for me, keep me in mind. But this one, I can't take it. And that's the dialogue that we need. That's the reality that we need to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, and there's no shame, I think, as a site to be like, hey,
Right.
we tried our best. It looked like a good fit. It turns out it wasn't because of name any number of infinite reasons that come up, throughout the course of a study, whether it be the study itself or the way the site's, put together. There could be any number of things, but I think it's okay and should be encouraged for, again, sites to just be truthful. Like, look, man, it's not working. Let's move on.
Yep.
Is it not automatically taken care when sites get more money with more activities per contract? PI gets more money to allocate more resource hour to manage situation.
No, that's all per site. That's every site does it differently.
Yeah, I don't think things are that simple. What about CRC bonus for retention into agreements? You mean patient retention, or we've played around with bonuses. Chris, we've done bonuses before, no, for other employees. We've even made CRCs part owners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's again a per site thing. I've seen some sites like CRCs, they'll get like a portion of the per patient values even when they complete the trial. So there is an incentive to work really hard to keep the patients on the trial.
Here's a call to action for all the site owners. Please complete these questionnaires. As a CRA, it is my first look at a site, and most are incomplete or not complete all the way. This creates a huge hurdle in expectations and communication. So we were talking about doing those surveys afterwards. Please complete the questionnaires and surveys. We need to weed out the bad CRAs. As a CRA, we do not know. It's completely anonymous. Yeah, I mean, lately most of the CRA has been pretty good. Okay, I think here we go. One more. For PI shortages, reluctance, why can't sponsors collaborate with FDA and tap into training PharmDs? UK already started this program. What do you guys think, sponsors? PharmDs, NPs. What about PAs being a PI? What are your thoughts on this?
I think it
on the
depends on
study.
yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Depends on the context of the study.
Yeah, I've done studies where their psychologists are the PIs. So it just depends on the type of drug that you're working with or the type of study that you're doing. But I find that a lot of times sites will have a PI and then nurse practitioners or other PAs and stuff that are handling the majority of the daily activities.
Yeah, I think ultimately training a PI and then booting them out into the world isn't really doing much good because they still need a good team around them. How many PIs are doing? They're not working in a vacuum. Frankly, the PI is doing probably the least amount of work, right? So they still need a good team around them. They still need to make sure they're getting paid, and that requires some admin staff. So I think just as important to have as much good qualified support than just PIs alone.
Well, and not only that, how many medical practitioners don't know enough about the research side of the industry, right? To know that maybe, yeah, I mean that, maybe I should start a site up or do some, take on a research study in my office just to kind of get their feet wet. I think a lot of sponsors may have a problem with like somebody that doesn't have any kind of experience in clinical trials. But there's ways around that through training, partnerships with CROs and investigators. I've seen some, talk about that. So I think that is definitely a challenge that we need to look at overcoming as an industry. But ultimately, I think it's going to come down to starting the conversation in medical school on this is something that you can do if you don't want to just be in clinic all day. There's other alternatives to just seeing patients. And I mean, like how many medical schools give any of their doctors business? Like there's no combined business schools or business classes. And I know that there's few. I think Texas Tech has one. It's a combined MBA program. But I mean, there's a business side of the industry that doctors may not be aware of, or even how to broach the door.
Well, I worked in academia before this, but I still talk to guys, men, women, whatever the case may be. But their first experience doing clinical trials sucked because it was part of working through an academic institution. Maybe they didn't get paid for the extra work they did. Frankly, a lot of academic institutions function as complete chaos, even much worse than your independent sites do. So a lot of them you'll go approach about it and like, oh yeah, I did it in fellowship or residency. It was terrible. I don't want to participate in research again.
I've heard that so many times, Brad. So many times. No, that was in medical school. I'm beyond that. I'm past that.
So whose responsibility is it then for, entrepreneurs? That's what myself, Brad, Dr. Fox, Chris do. We try to find research naive community clinicians and groom them into being PIs. But other than us, like, do you think it's sponsors should be doing this? Do you think it's CROs should be looking for these physicians? I mean, it would make the most sense for sponsors to want to be involved in this, especially the bigger ones. They already have sales reps and medical science liaisons going out there. What are you guys' thoughts on this as sponsor representatives?
Yeah, I mean, Dan, I think it's, like Brad mentioned, if you honestly polled providers, MDs, DOs, I'm comfortable in saying that 95% of them have no idea that this is even something that's possible, right? Mm-hmm. And then the ones like Dan, you had a guy on your podcast, or maybe I can't remember if it was Brad or Dr. Fox. You guys all have so many channels going, and I watch them all. But the point is, somebody had a neurologist on their channel, and was that you, Dr. Fox?
No, that was Dan. Remember Dan and Chris? We brought.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That's right. Yeah.
That guy was. Yeah, he was just about to close this down because he was tired of it.
He's just like, what? He's like, I don't need this headache in my life. I gotta chase that. I mean, it's worse than dealing with insurance companies. He's like, I'm doing the work. I don't get paid. Like, what the hell? So here's a perfect example of a very capable individual who is wanting to advance science, wanting to bring new therapies to his patients out of the benevolent agenda in his own heart, and he just had such a bad experience. He's like, I don't need this. And this was with a large pharma, if I recall, and a large CRO. And he was like, I haven't been paid in 13 months. Long time. So that has to change.
Yeah.
Community education has to change. And I think Justin makes a good point. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities in schooling of physicians to them to understand this, because without engagement of physicians, how do we advance science? You don't.
So as with most things, small business is the solution. Entrepreneurship is the solution. Short answer.
Well, but not only that, so there's professional, like the ACRP, right? So those are, big professional organizations. Why aren't there more outreach programs to medical schools or, other areas?
Show me the money. I think
it's already so intensive with just so many other aspects that you bring in this. It's just, young new doctors are gung-ho to get out there, get in residency. They're working obscene hours, making very little bit of money until they're out of residency. And when they're out of residency, they've got $500,000 in debt to pay. And I don't know who just mentioned it, but the risk associated with going down this pathway. And I've had PIs as a CRA come to me and say, Robert, I really didn't understand what I was signed up for. I had some guy come to me. He would bring me a bunch of papers once a week. I would sign them. And he's like, I don't even know if I'm qualified to be a PI. I'm like, are we really having this conversation? And I had to escalate. This happened in Palm Springs. I'm dead serious, in California.
Wow.
And as a matter of fact, that PI, I'm like, do you even know like what the color of the walls are in that building? He's like, no idea. I have no clue. He's like, I'm retired. I'm just trying to bring in a little bit of extra money. I have
Wow.
stage 4, pancreatic cancer. I'm just trying to help these patients, because they're in pain. It was an endometriosis study. And he had never even stepped foot in this. And some site owner just pitched him a bill of goods. And he was an
Wow.
older gentleman. Yeah. And he's like, and he literally came to me and he's like, I would like to resign as the PI. I'm like, well, doctor, it's not, I'm going to help you through this, but it's not just, I'm going to resign. But so, I mean, we've seen it all, right? These types of predatory tactics on recruiting vulnerable doctors who are retired, or the doctors who are desperate to make ends meet because they have loans to pay off. There's a lot going on. So I think, there's a lot of areas and places where outreach can happen, but with continuing medical education credits, CME, and the constant, stipulations and regulations imposed on our providers, it's tough. It's a tough sell. I was like at my internal medicine doctor's office, right? And I think I was there for my yearly physical, and I said to him, like, hey, why aren't you doing clinical research? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, clinical research, like, why not do it? He's like, oh no, he's like, that's just not for me. I've heard horror stories,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, wow, I couldn't even, and he was just, the conversation was checked out,
My
right there.
favorite, my favorite saying was PI saying that research is just a really expensive hobby. That's all it is.
They need to listen to a Dr. Fox podcast skit. They will change their mind.
Which
Forever.
one? Which one?
All of them. When do we get paid? Never. Lee says, "Hey Lee, what's up, man? I'm having challenges with sponsors. Here's actually like the solution. Right? It's the solution is guys and gals like Brad, Chris, Dr. Fox, me, Lee, and many others that are coming to save our sites, because big pharma is not going to do it. Little pharma can't even think 3 years from now, right? They're not going to think 10 years from now. CRO's not going to do it. So who's left? AMCs are not going to do it. So it's just small community sites. This is why we got to save our sites, exactly because of this question. Most studies now need a specialist as a sub-I, this and that. It behooves us as sites to go out and find doctors in our communities. And then it's the good sites, the ones that manage their business as well, if they're smart, they're going to work on grooming them to be PIs. So it's just going to be a grassroots effort among small sites, I think, to solve this issue. And we need more research naive physicians in research, because they're the ones that are seeing the research naive patients. We can't keep recycling the same patients in every study. That's going to solve the diversity issue. That's going to solve slow enrollment. That's going to solve all kinds of things, ideally. And this is one of the reasons why Save Our Sites exists. Yes, Lee, I'm experiencing this on every study just about.
Yep. You have an ophthalmology study. They expect an endocrinologist and a nephrologist in there. You've got...
Yeah.
It's
and throw in a liver biopsy while you're at it.
So specialized. Yeah, then you're going to have to bring in GI. So
don't forget the audiologist for hearing.
Yep,
yeah,
audiology
true.
And everything else. So you're absolutely going to have, as research becomes more specialized, you're going to have more specialists. Healthcare integration is going to be the only way to do it.
But
That's going to be the
society's answer is, let's just get all these large healthcare systems to consolidate, and then let's do our research into them as well. You know, and it's not, I don't think it's going to work. I think you need to go long tail, smaller sites need to get more nimble and get more flexible as far as the kind of study offerings they can do. Because if we rely on large systems, I mean, okay, if it's private but a large healthcare system like Kaiser, I mean, what difference is Kaiser from an AMC really? Like, they're the same thing, right? Just dressed up differently. That's my thoughts on that. I'm pretty passionate about this. I think there's opportunity for us small site owners. This is why sites are never going away. And you can try all this stuff about doing research in buses and at liquor stores and all these things.
Or Brad going to the donut shop and slapping donuts out of these diabetic patients' hands. I mean, that's a good one too,
True story. We had a donut shop owner want us to open a research clinic in their shop. And I
That's
actually
amazing.
think that would have worked. Chris, is this not true? Chris remembers this. This donut shop owner, he wanted to do research, and we actually think he could have been successful.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think he had difficulties finding a PI was the reason he never got started. But if he found a PI that liked donuts, and Dan and I know a few,
Yeah,
big
that would have worked. Well, anyways, anyone else got something to say, or we'll just keep going on rants? And we've been told not to go on rants, too. So
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that's yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
I'll say I just to tack on to sort of the last little topic we're having here. Look, I owe. I'm here in a big health system, providing research infrastructure for the whole group, 300 plus physicians across the state, blah, blah, blah. The only reason I'm here is because of a discussion I had with an MSL who said, oh, hey, we're doing a study and I know this doctor. He really wants to do research. Let me just introduce you to him. And that was the beginning that got me in and it got me a contract and blew up here. And since then, they've given us half a dozen more studies, probably more than that. But I feel like, and I've seen that with some other companies as well. I think that's where we could see some, I think, big changes or big movement in the right direction is, the us of the world just working with all we need is an introduction. They don't have to force it on anyone, but just start making some connections. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to help your study. It's also going to help your pipeline. It's going to help the community. It's going to help everyone. And all it took was a 5-minute introduction. That's all it took.
See, from the big pharma MSL, and you're actually perfect example. You work within a large healthcare system, but it took an entrepreneur and a small business to pull it all together because that health system wasn't going to do it on its own.
Exactly. Yeah.
Robert, I think that's a good SOS topic. We got to put that on the agenda. How best to have conversations between sites and sponsors.
I definitely agree.
Memes. We speak in memes.
Speak in memes. Yeah.
That's my love language. So a question I have is so Brad or anybody, how would you go about, you mentioned, making that introduction. If there is a physician that wanted to get into clinical research, where would you send them? Like where would you provide them information or how would they learn more about going into opening up the site?
I mean, Dan's got 10 years of video about how to start.
We have a resource page. Yeah, we have a resource page. Chris and I made a two-hour videos on the blueprint of how to start your own research clinic. If you have a private practice, is ideal. That's the ideal setup. You already have your PI and your patients. Like what do sponsors need when they need a study site? They need a PI. Okay, check. You need patients. Check. Okay. Let's get a coordinator to run the whole thing. And this is why I think training, some of the questions here were in regards to training. And we have a CRC Academy, but I think there's a lot of good solution providers out there. But 6-month learning curve for a good CRC, or you can hire an experienced one. And that's really what you need.
I would read Dan's book. Everyone has Dan's book. So if you don't have Dan's book, then you're probably not in the industry.
Man, thank you.
And even beyond that, I don't know about you guys. I take multiple calls every week with people that are like us or thinking about starting a site or a doctor who wants to get involved, and just having a half an hour conversation with them. I think a lot of people in the industry and who have some level of knowledge are willing to share that. Of course, you can't. There's only so much you can do in a short conversation, but I have those conversations every week, and I tell people, I'll tell you exactly what I did to get to where we are.
Yep. Justin, Robert, as we wrap up, thank you guys, by the way, everybody, for sticking around. This is like a little taste of SOS, what's to come, just like an appetizer. But I know you're a small sponsor. I know you guys are a small sponsor, but I mean, put yourself in the shoes of maybe like a big pharma. Is it in their interest to have a high prescribing physician for like one of their drugs and the same guy or gal doing research? Like, is that an asset for that pharma? Would that make a KOL, or are they not so interested in that? Is it just like sounds cooler than it actually is?
I mean, absolutely, right? I mean, a high prescriber in a given therapeutic area. One of the main questions investors always ask is, what's the appetite and take up of this drug to be first in class, So given that you're collaborating with a large, well-known name who has influence in the community, that person's likely to attend conferences that other physicians are going to attend. You do a presentation on the research and the new drug, and from a marketing commercialization perspective, absolutely.
And that's great for a
Absolutely.
comparator trial. If you have to do a comparator trial for efficacy, you want that high prescriber, because then you're going to have access to the patients who are receiving maybe the comparator.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, just curious, but so yeah, I mean, then there's clearly some incentive, not just for small business owners like ourselves, but some of the big pharma as well.
Mhm.
Happy to talk to you guys, big pharma. Yuma, Arizona is a great place for research. Let me tell you,
It
the
really
weather's
is.
beautiful, the population's great, it's diverse. YumaClinicalTrials.com.
I'll have to
Anything
come out
else,
there
White?
for a visit, Dan. I'd like to come see your site.
Yeah, we'll get a good bean and cheese burrito, man.
It sounds
I
good.
like the plug, Dan.
Man,
Got to
they
get
are
the
good.
jab in there. Anything else, guys? Where can people find you, Justin? Are you on? We know Chris is not anywhere on any of
I'm on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Okay,
Yeah,
we'll
I'll
put
send you.
links to
I'll
everybody.
send Justin's link to you, Dan.
If you guys are listening or watching later, like go follow everybody. Their links are underneath or in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for the spontaneous thing. Look, we still have tickets to Save Our Sites. They're still at a set price. We might be raising prices as it gets closer to the end of the year. So get in now. Hey, if you missed early bird, all right, so what? $50. So you missed out. Okay, it's 150 now. But it might be 300 in 3 months. We don't know. Even Dr. Fox and Chris don't know. How do I know if they don't know? So it might be 300.
3,000. Who knows?
It might be 3,000. So
We're gonna,
like this is a sense of urgency we're building.
I don't want to be a
SaveOurSites.com.
mouthwash conference, Dan.
Oh no. I know who you're referring to. I've actually only been once, but it was okay. But yeah, SaveOurSites.com, guys, get in right now while you can. And
Mhm.
there is a limit to how many people can join. Right now we're not close to approaching that limit, but who knows? Who knows how this year's
25% of the way there.
Yeah, we're getting there.
is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's 25%.
Okay, yeah.
Not
yeah.
quite. We're getting there.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Any last words or we're done?
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yep, I'll be at SOS. So I would love to meet everybody, and if there's anybody watching that wants to reach out and have a conversation, let's do that. Huge fan of everybody on this panel, and Dan, Dr. Fox, Chris, great to see you guys as always, and
Nice
thank
to
you
meet you,
for
Robert.
having us.
Justin
for
needs
having
his
us.
own pod. You and Robert, you and Justin should get your own podcast, man.
Yeah.
Like
We
two
should.
sponsors discussing the industry, the state of the industry.
Yeah.
Something catchy. I think that would be a good one.
If anyone wants a little bit of a teaser, Raymond In himself from Creo has interviewed for CRTN Central, and that'll be the June episode. It's
Love
coming out in about a week.
Love Creo. Shout out to them too, one of the sponsors of the podcast. So thank you everybody, and thank you everybody for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and listening. Bye bye.